One. All right. So we're here live with Julien Simon, who I'm a huge fan of. I've been aware of his work for a long time with AWS, and I thought this would be maybe one of the best possible people to talk about MLOps, in my opinion. And the company he's at, I think, is Hugging Face is really in the exact spot where I think the industry is headed. So yeah, maybe you can introduce yourself and
Sure.
and talk a
Thank
little
you,
bit.
Noah. Thanks so much for having me, and I'm a big fan too, by the way. So now like a lot of people watching, you have great content. So well, I'm chief evangelist for Hugging Face. I've been with Hugging Face for about a year now, and before that, I spent about 6 years at AWS in the developer relations team, focusing on AI and machine learning, and yeah, spending a lot of time on the AI ML stack that AWS is building, particularly on Amazon SageMaker, which obviously is what you could call an MLOps service, right? Bringing your models into production. So yeah, happy to chat and try to give some thoughts and pointers to the listeners.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up into MLOps very quickly, because one of the things that I think is misunderstood, and I think you and I are on the same page on this, but is misunderstood, is people talk about MLOps, and then the feature store, like S3
Yeah.
or what, and it's sure, of course, yeah, of course you can do that, but it's like saying to someone who is a pizza catering service to say to them like, oh no, we can only talk about certain kinds of pizzas if it's frozen,
Yeah.
or it's pre-prepared, then that's not called pizza anymore. It's like, no, it is called pizza. There are
Yes.
many kinds of pizza. There's frozen pizza, there's pizza that's prepped the night before, there's pizza where you made the dough the same day. Like, there's lots of different kinds of pizza. There's pizza that is already cooked, and then you take it and you deliver it somewhere. So I think that there's this misunderstanding that organizations that are doing MLOps like have to always create the model themselves, and that maybe that's a good
Yeah,
thing for
that's a
you
good
to
point.
discuss.
Well, to me, MLOps is, if we gotta draw the line, is uh, anything that needs to happen once you have a model to bring that model in production, and I mean production, right? Not POC, not sandbox, production. Receiving real life traffic. That's it. You know, and in a way, and we love to have buzzwords in this industry, but it's no different from DevOps, and which is really, hey, I've got this code. It's been written, it's been hopefully tested, and I need to put that stuff in prod so that my users and my other apps can use it. So, and I got to live with it. And I think that's the painful part. It's the difficult part. It was difficult for web applications and microservices, and I think it's even more difficult for machine learning models, um, because a model in production is difficult to observe. Observability is a big concern for production environments, right? And it's already difficult to know whether your web services and your apps are working, but a model can go wrong in so many ways, and a lot of them are completely invisible. Not to mention, scaling them and retraining them, etc. So yeah, let's call it MLOps. And indeed, it's to me, it's not related to training or building models, or that's the upstream bit, which isn't that difficult these days, and it's becoming less and less relevant because of transformers and transfer learning and model zoos, off the shelf models that you can easily experiment with and grab. And then the question is, okay, I kind of like the model now, I want to put it in my production environment. And whether you're a startup that deploys in cowboy mode, or whether you're a Fortune 100 company that has very strict compliance rules and complex processes to deploy. It's quite an adventure. So yeah, there's definitely room for more videos and more books and more headaches. It's difficult.
Yeah, I like what you're saying about the concept of the end result versus the methodology to get
Mhm.
to that result. Where in academics, which I have some experience in academics, I'm still in it, kind of. I have a half a foot in. Is that in that environment, people are judged by basically peer acceptance. So
Mhm.
people are writing research papers and they're writing about theoretical things. But then in the business world, the theory, some of it's helpful, but ultimately it's ROI, right? Like, are you
Yes,
solving a
absolutely.
particular problem? How much did it cost? What are the results? Did you create debt that we can never recover from because you created, I don't know, like systemic bias for,
Mm.
discrimination for housing or something? Like, there's all these other issues
Yeah,
that have nothing to do at all with
yeah,
training the model.
yeah, and we do need researchers, we do need science teams, we do need super smart PhD folks to advance the state of the art. Um, but they're only concerned with, hey, did I improve on the state of the art benchmark? Did I, whatever that benchmark is, is the model, faster or more accurate, or whatever you're concerned with at the moment, and that's fine. But then, they I was going to say they pushed the model to the Hugging Face hub, and they published a paper, and again, we're very appreciative of that. But as a business, as someone who has a business problem to work on, and business problem could be, you know recommending products, or it could be, healthcare, or it could be education. I take business in the widest sense of the word here. It doesn't have to be a commercial thing, but it's a real life problem I want to fix. And I take that model for granted. I can understand, I can read the research paper, I can understand what it's good at, I can understand how better it is compared to the previous models, etc. But honestly, it's not what's going to impress my users and my stakeholders, right? If you work again in a startup or in enterprise, you're not going to wave the archive paper to your business stakeholders, to your CMO or your CFO, and say, look, the confusion metrics is just a lot better with this. It's like, no. Um, and they don't care. They want business outcomes. They want business KPIs to be positively impacted. And when it comes to your IT team, or your risk management team and your compliance team, the last thing they want is another model in prod. So they probably think they have too many already. So it's generally an uphill battle to find a way to bring that model in production at the right level of performance, which means, again, business performance, and of course technical performance, latency, security, compliance, and cost. Because transformer models, for example, are amazing models. I mean, we you can see them every day. The new ones are increasingly amazing, but they're big, they're bulky, they need a lot of GPU power, a lot of memory, and they work very well in the sandbox, but in production is a different game. And maybe the cost, maybe the economics of that particular model are just awful. Maybe they're a little better, but that uplift doesn't create enough dollar value to justify the infrastructure cost. So, and obviously that's a completely different discussion from the science discussion. So yes, MLOps is all that stuff. Start from a great model you read about and experimented with, and see if you can find a way to bring it to prod in a sensible way.
And it reminds me a little bit of sports where you could pick any sport. Like, you can pick football, You can pick basketball, mixed martial arts, whatever the sport is. You see this example of there's the goal, right? That is worth 1 point. That's, they just kick it in, and then and then there's like someone does a bicycle kick and kicks it in. They're both worth the same,
Yes.
like right. And I think with machine learning, we haven't learned what a lot of software engineers, like you said, DevOps people learned a long time ago, which is the essence of software engineering is reduction of complexity. That's any good software engineer or
Mhm.
DevOps person. They reduce complexity so small that everything's knowable. In machine learning, we're exploding complexity so
Yeah.
large we don't know anything.
Yeah, it's a lot of enterprise problems are still solved, are still classification problems or regression problems, and they're still solved with XGBoost or like GBM or any variation on those. And so playing devil's advocate here, as a as a as a CTO, as a business stakeholder, I would challenge the fact that, hey, okay, we go from 98.5 accuracy to with the existing non-deep learning solution to 99, but the latency is 10x at least, and the infra cost is 10x. So how does that work? Show me the business impact, and I think that's where a lot of data scientists and machine learning teams struggle. If you come to your customers and stakeholders with machine learning metrics, um, they're going to kick you out. Like, they don't care about F1 scores and whatnot. It's not telling the whole story. At the end of the day, you need to show them that there is dollar value in this new model, and maybe there's increased infrastructure cost, although of course, like everything else, you can optimize transformers and you can optimize infrastructure, and there's a lot of amazing work happening there on hardware acceleration, and we're trying to contribute to that. A lot of very cool work in shrink model compression, quantization, all those amazing techniques kind of lower the cost, but that's more work you need to do. So MLOps is really again finding the balance between time and effort and explainability and compliance and performance and cost. So it's a fascinating field because it's not just technical. It's not just run tool A and run tool B and run tool C. Oh, okay, fine. We have a cool model artifact, then we can throw in prod, and then it's all fine. There's still a lot of unknowns here, and again,
And
Hugging Face is trying to
yeah,
help there, but we're only getting started.
yeah, and I think the other part of this that's interesting is the concept of where should you start if you're building an end-to-end pipeline. And in
Yeah.
many cases you should start with a heuristic, right?
Mm.
And a classic example is the recommendation engine. Like I worked at a sports social network 2013, long almost 10 years ago, and I wrote the recommendation engine. I remember having a discussion with everybody. It's like, look, first of all, we have very little information about how they work. We have no data, right? We don't know what people like, and so we have to create a heuristic. There's no other possible way to create a recommendation engine. And then I created a heuristic, basically similarity ranking, and
Hmm.
then you just find like who, with a typical collaborative filtering algorithm, you say like, who do you not follow, right? Oh, you're similar to this person. Well, you probably want this person. But and then you collect the data, and that's not like an easy process. Like
Hmm.
it's like a huge long process. But then even further, what's tricky about something like that is first you have to start with the heuristic, then you have to
Yeah.
collect the data, and then this is what I've really been kind of looking at people that do recommendation engines now. And one of the things I'm seeing is because that's one of the advantages of building something yourself and having it run in production, is even the top companies of the world, they have bad user experience.
Mm.
I'll give you an example. GitHub has been recommending people to me all the time. Oh, you want to follow this person? Wait, I already saw that person. I don't want to
Yeah.
follow them. I
Yeah.
actually, they wrote bad code and I don't actually want to see anything they do. I can't like I can't get rid of it. So to kind of going all the way back to Hugging Face, to me it seems like the parts that are actually the most interesting parts have nothing to do with me training the model. It's me collecting the data from the model that's been
Yes.
deployed and then working on the user experience.
Yeah, and I'm always a little wary about trends and buzzwords, and we like I said, we have way too many. But the whole data centric AI movement, let's call it like that, I think is asking the right questions. It's it's always about the data. In the 1970s, it was about the data already, right? Garbage in, garbage out. You can have the best algorithm, you can have the smartest code and the best model. If you feed it, crap features, unclean data, or like stupid features, make your pick. Guess what you're gonna get. And and I think, if anything, time is always constrained. So if anything, work with simpler algorithms, smaller transformers, and spend more time collecting data, understanding data, cleaning data, etc., etc. I think it's, you'll. I don't see how you can go wrong that way. Maybe you're not going to get to the accuracy you need, but at least you'll get a solid baseline, right? And I think there's a risk because those models are increasingly huge. And it's always tempting. There's a wow effect. You want to work, and there's a hype effect. You want to work with the latest and greatest model that whoever released. One day it's going to be Google, and the next it's going to be Meta, and then the next is going to be Microsoft, and then the next is going to be someone else. So you're kind of chasing the trend here, and that's okay. It's why not? But the time you don't invest in understanding the business problem and collecting data and talking to domain experts, and so on, is time you'll never get back, because you keep chasing the latest and greatest model, and it's pixie dust in a way. Those models are amazing, but who really needs them? It's maybe 5 companies or 10 companies in the world are able to run those models at scale in the greatest and most efficient way. For everybody else, maybe Distilbert, or maybe those effective, optimized versions of huge models are a more reasonable bet. They're going to be smaller. They're going to have less impact on your infrastructure. They're going to be faster. They're going to be cheaper to run. They're going to be faster to fine tune. So, my advice, as always, is start small. I was telling people that 7 years ago on EC2 instances. Why don't you start deploying your app on T2 Micro? It's like, oh, it's going to be way too small.
Well,
Well, did you
check
try it?
when to try it out. Yeah, exactly.
Why did you go with the big M4, and the big M5? And can you, and work your way up? And I think the same advice works for machine learning. Try, I'm going to say try linear regression and XGBoost first for some problems. And unstructured data, obviously, that doesn't work super well. But when you work with deep learning, start try the smaller transformers for NLP, and experiment quickly there. And now you get your baseline, and start fine tuning a little bit. And that's not going to train for weeks, right? Don't go for the big guns immediately.
Mhm.
These are longer to train, more difficult. They're more, finicky in a way. And yeah, just step by step, right? And be pragmatic, be reasonable. And it's also a good strategy to show incremental progress, right? Because maybe the accuracy is not what you want in the first few iterations, but you can understand what's correctly predicted, what's not. It helps you understand the problem better, and you can add more data, or work on the data set a little bit and try something else, and you can show to your customers and your stakeholders that there's progress, week after week,
Yeah,
instead of fighting your way through huge models that for months, and going into what is literally a waterfall project and not an
yeah,
agile project.
it is exactly what you're just. I totally agree with what you're saying, and it reminds me of my experience running companies that built products. That it My specialty was actually implementing DevOps in companies, and it was always the same thing. It was always like a failed project that had all of the best technology, but
Yes.
no iterative process, right? And they were, like, and I remember I was at this one company that said, that oh, we just need a performance engineer, and I was like, no, that's not what you need. You
No.
need entirely new process. Like, the problem, that the reason why your application blows up my entire laptop even though it's a web app, is not because you need a performance engineer, because your entire process is broken.
Yeah.
You don't have an iterative process. And, like, to your point, it a little bit reminds me of someone building a bridge, or growing a plant. And a lot of people think that machine learning engineering or software engineering is building a bridge, when it's a plant. And what happens with a plant is every day is a new day. There's sun, there's soil, there's like nutrients, there's water, there's like the wind has to blow in a certain way. So you have to build a system to support the growth of the ecosystem. It's the system that's important, not like each one of those individual pieces.
Yeah, it's I totally agree. It's you need to get into that agile mindset, and when I say agile and machine learning in the same sentence, people stare at me like I'm crazy, but I'm not. I'll defend that for as long as I can. But I think agile is actually the way to get to successful ML projects, and start small, and then start even when you can start with non-deep learning, and if you move to deep learning, consider non-transformer models. Get again, every approach, every model architecture you work with is going to teach you something. And if you move to transformers and big transformers, etc., and really big transformers, you know why, and you understand the problem better. I think if you it's what you said, right? I mean, it's like people are trying to build a web platform with ev- picking the best of breed component, or the best of breed SaaS service, or open source project for everything. It looks great, it looks great on slides, it looks great on in conferences, it might look great on your resume if people are interested in buzzwords. But me, I'm interested in business results. Okay, how fast you get to production, how quickly can you iterate, how quickly can you go from business problem to ML project to model in production. Hours, days, weeks, month, years. you know
And the other thing that
and
there's
the
two.
faster you iterate, the more you learn, the more feedback you get from customers, whether
Yeah.
they're actual customers or internal users. And that's the gold right there. It's the feedback. It's not, because you don't know what real life data looks like most of the time. It's so weird. Like images coming from mobile phones, they change all the time. They get, some of them are bad, just bad pictures, and they get like mobile phone pictures from 5 years ago, and now they have nothing in common. Speech is the same, etc., etc. So you don't know what the data looks like. So the and what problems you're going to have in production, and what kind of bias you could have, etc., etc. So you will only know when you get that stuff in production. So the faster you do it, and the deploy fast, deploy often, that still stands for machine learning.
There's two different business books that I think are interesting books that apply. One of them is, the or the series is like Michael Porter strategy. And what I was just recently reading like a summary of a lot of his books, and one of the things he mentions is this concept of, you don't want to get into a business where it's a competition based business, where you're directly competing against other people, because theoretically in perfect competition all profit leads to zero.
Mm.
And then if you're a startup and you're trying to outcompete Google or you know Hugging Face or someone else, and like that's another example of like, wait, well, like, why don't I focus on the unique value
Mm.
my business offers
Yes.
to the customer and not compete at all against people in the building
Yeah.
bespoke machine learning models, or to your point, picking the most incredible machine learning model, because you're now in a competition, an execution based competition, which is basically the worst possible scenario for your
Yeah.
business.
And so I years ago I saw this tweet, and I apologies for not remembering who said that, but they said, hey, if you're the founder of a startup, and your product is a gap in AWS's roadmap, think again.
Yeah.
And and it's the same for it's the same for other big players. So yeah, I think that's, you're trying to, you're running in front of the freight train. So you could be running a little fast in the beginning, but the freight train will squash you to the bloody pulp, and that's never a great experience. So I think it's if you look at the B2C, the amazing B2C apps that came in the last few years, and you can all just look at your phone to see which ones I'm talking about. um, they solved problems that a million people tried to solve before them, like car sharing, ride sharing. Don't you think, like 2,000 startups tried to solve that? One of them grew really big. And music recommendation is a problem that a lot of people try to solve. And dating is a problem that a lot of companies try to solve. And they yet, like one super efficient and super, amazing company solved each one of them, and that's probably the one each one of us is using today. And the reason why they were so successful is because they were super pragmatic about the problem they tried to solve. So of course then they grew into technology companies, and now they have machine learning teams, and they have everything else, and they actually write very very cool open source projects that they share, etc., etc. But initially they just moved very fast, and they were very pragmatic. So if I was founding a startup today, the last thing I would do would be to hire data scientists. Sorry, folks. I would hire designers, and I would hire front end gurus, and a very good PM or two. Um, and folks who can listen to what the customers have to say, and turn feedback into sprints, and user stories. And I would ask them to delay as much as possible any significant machine learning effort, because that's not where the battle is going to be won. You know, that's not where the battle is going to be won. I'm a music fan. I'm a big fan of Spotify, like like everyone else, I guess. Um, but the user experience that I get there is just way more than the quality of their recommendation. You know, yes, their recommendation works pretty well for my tastes, but I like everything else. I like the fact that I can plug my phone in the car and it works, and I can, etc., etc. So machine learning is important, right? I'm not going to say otherwise, but unless you're a machine learning company, um, you should be very frugal with the time and effort you invest in there. And we have 60. I just checked. We have 66,000 pre-trained models on Hugging Face right now. Okay, why don't you start there? The chances are you can get some work done with a reasonable amount of quality with one of those. and that should be enough for POC and maybe for early A/B testing and maybe even for prod. And if you need to go and fine tune models and spend money on GPUs and cloud infrastructure and all that good stuff, which is cool, you should have a good reason for it. But like adding extra lines on your resumes or trying to wow whoever, well, with your fancy technical blog posts is not helping your company, is not helping your customers, right? You got to think about the user experience first and foremost.
Yeah, in that's actually exactly the point in the book "Good to Great" by Tom. I think it's Tom Collins is his name. Also, another business author, and he did all this research on like what companies went from good to great companies, and one of the criteria that is relevant to machine learning was that companies that went good to great were companies that were already had like a great business, and
Hmm.
technology was an accelerant, but they
Yes.
did not become a technology company. So to your point, if you have a great business model and you're solving a particular problem and it's unique, you're not in like brutal competition with other people, then really the machine learning is you want to minimize it. You want to, and so I agree with you. Like if I was, building a startup, I would 100% do what you're suggesting is I would not. I've built many machine learning models in production. I would use Hugging Face, and I'm not trying to pump up Hugging Face
No, no,
per
come on.
se. I'm just saying like it just makes sense to me. Like it's just like if someone said, "Hey, should I build my own web framework?" No, you shouldn't. You just whatever one you find
Yeah,
is popular. It used to be Flask for microservices. Now it's fast. Sure, use
yeah.
that one.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. And years ago, and not so many years ago, I was meeting when I was at AWS. I was meeting with companies who were trying to explain that S3 wouldn't work for them, and they were building some arcane open source hacky thing that most of the time ended up dying in flames, and of course they would call us, and I never took any satisfaction for that. I felt sorry for those folks because they were misguided. They were misguided because some engineer just had a louder voice than the others and convinced them that this was great, and when it wasn't. And I think to avoid that, I think it's particularly, and it's a topic we don't often discuss. I think it's very important for execs to understand that. I'm always a little concerned when I meet CEOs or founders, that non-technical founders, and we have this discussion, and we start talking about tech and ML, etc. And they say, "Oh yeah, my CTO is in charge of that." And I'm like, "Well, I hope they are right." Yeah, but in this day, and age, I would think that any CEO, any founder should understand enough technology to make sure the right choices are being made. And it could be going on prem instead of going to the cloud, which some people do, and some of them have a very valid reason to do it, but a lot of them just do it because someone wants to rack servers and
Mhm.
and play king of the hill or king of the data center. Yes, it still happens. um, and for ML, it's the same. I see people going into, "Oh, we customized our own version of BERT because blah 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 blah," because somebody wanted to do it. And again, it's as an engineer, it's certainly fun to do, and it certainly looks good on your resume, and it will certainly impress your friends at the next ML bar meetup or something. But from a business perspective, from you know um, a shareholder perspective, from from a customer perspective, it's the wrong move. So
Yeah,
I'm not asking that CEOs understand when to use PyTorch or when to use TensorFlow. That's not what I say, right? uh, but I mean, how much machine learning goes into the product, what kind of machine learning goes into the product, what that means for the end user experience is certainly something CEOs should worry about.
yeah. I would I can't agree more with that as well. That's been my experience, and I've personally been burned by it, even being the CTO. And one of the things I would say is that the anytime you hear someone say we're using exotic technology or like advanced technology, I would say they have a greater chance at failure than companies that are using like off the shelf technology.
Yeah.
And a good example is, I think one of the mistakes I've made in my career, I had lots of successes, but I've also had failures. A lot of people don't admit their failures.
Oh,
I'll admit one of my
want to
failures.
see mine?
Yeah. One of them was that I remember being convinced that programming languages were like the number one advantage. And
Oh yeah.
I used Erlang, the language, and it's an interesting language for sure, and there's lots of cool things about it. The problem with using like weird languages, this was before AWS Lambda came out,
Mm,
was basically AWS Lambda makes Erlang not even important
mm,
because it's a basically a concurrency language where like messages can pass between
yeah.
each other. But if you have AWS Lambda, the entire concept is irrelevant. And AWS, I can call up on the phone and say, hey, by the way, yeah, Lambda, I have some problems with it. Oh, sure, let me fix it. So the idea that you tell people that you're using something that only a few people understand, not only are you probably going to fail, but two, even if you're successful, here's the problem: who are you going to hire? Nobody.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it's literally, if a venture capitalist or a CEO here's my opinion, and I agree with you, most people don't talk about it. If you say I'm using exotic technology and all these like advanced things, you're basically broadcasting that your chance at failure is way higher, like by
Yeah. You're
multitudes.
fragile.
You're fragile.
It's I've done some not recently because I don't have much time
You-
now, but I've done some due deals, back in the day for VCs, and I would always look at that. I would look at the people, obviously the quality of the team, which is still the number one criteria. If you have the right group of people, they'll walk through hell and back, and there's nothing they won't solve. But if their start, if their stack is just a weird combination of exotic stuff because there's this amazing feature in F sharp that is crucial to our business. I'm like, what?
That's a red flag.
What's your business again?
Right.
Or they use this weird backend that doesn't make a lot of sense.
They wrote their own database.
Yeah, yeah, they wrote their own cache system. It's like, oh no, we couldn't use Redis or Memcache because it's different. Um, and again, there's a niche of companies that have to do that. Okay, like exotic, you know, um, exotic financial services companies that do everything in C++, and they have hardware acceleration everywhere because they're chasing microseconds. Okay, these folks are, it's another planet. I'm not talking about that, but your web company, you're building I don't know, a price comparator for insurance, companies, that kind of stuff. It's like, okay, this, should be able to do it with PHP, MySQL, and Apache, right, or Nginx. So same for ML. I think it's there are some really good tools out there. Most of them open source. There are lots of off-the-shelf models. Hugging Face has a lot, like I said. Um, Infrastructure isn't available in the cloud on demand. So until you know better, until you have a compelling reason to do better, please do yourself a favor. Do not reinvent the wheel. Start with existing stuff. Start with mainstream technologies that are that are easy to get support on, easy to find talent for. Um, when you get bigger, when you have scaling concerns or additional concerns, it'll be, maybe it'll be time to go a little more exotic. But yeah, start small. And uh, to me, the main reason for not doing this is because you're influenced by hype. And there's this amazing blog post from a few years ago called Hype-Driven Development. I forgot the name of the author. Apologies, but that was a brilliant blog post that I used a lot in my talks. Go and find it. And and the conclusion is, you need to use boring technology.
Yeah.
And I tell everybody, and even at Hugging Face, they don't really like it when I say that, but I want to make machine learning boring. And it's exactly what I mean. I want to make machine learning as simple to use as S3. Okay, my dad can use it. My dad can use S3. Okay, so that's fine. And he's not an engineer at all. So
Yeah, I
I
agree.
want to make machine learning this simple and this
Yeah.
commoditized and this accessible, because once we have that, once it's become transparent, then it's super easy to add everywhere, and it can solve a lot of problems, whether business, technical, social, etc. And I think that's what we want.
Yeah,
That's what I want.
it's the opposite. I agree. I think right now we're 80% of people are interested in doing exotic and 20% are interested in simple, but we need to flip it the other way.
Yeah.
And so maybe there's a good segue to ask about Hugging Face now, because I think still I think a lot of people don't know how useful of a platform it is. Like, what are some things that someone could do to, they're at a startup and maybe they're even concerned. They listen to the last few minutes of what we're saying. They're like, oh, that's my company. Like, what can they
I hope not.
do to turn the tide and use Hugging Face? And like, is there like a recipe that you would recommend?
So we try to make machine learning as simple as software engineering. Okay, so the tools, the libraries, and the solutions that we build are targeted at Joe developer and Jane developer. And I mean that in the most friendly and positive way possible. So if you're listening to this and you don't have a machine learning background, and even if you do, and you find yourself confused and scared, and by okay, I know I can add ML to my app and make it better, but I have no idea where to start, then what I really would recommend is that you go to the Hugging Face hub, huggingface.co, and you'll see we have lots of models for natural language processing and computer vision and speech, etc., etc. And you can quickly browse those models through the task type. So let's say you want a model to summarize French documents. Click on summarization and French language, and you'll get a list of models. They're sorted by popularity, number of downloads, etc. So you can look at the top popular models. That's always I guess the safest bet. Click on them. You can read about them. We have for many models we have extensive descriptions. We call that the model card, telling you what the model is, how it's been trained, what it's good for, code snippets to use it. You can even test the model right there on the page. There's what we call the Inference widget, which is a small box where you can type text or upload an image or an audio clip, depending on the modality, and you can see some results, right? And you can educate yourself on, okay, so that architecture, that model is good for this kind of problem. Okay, so then the next step is you copy paste those code snippets to download the model, load it into your app, which is really it's a one-liner most of the time, and start predicting stuff right in your dev environment and see how it goes, right? And measure accuracy and measure performance, etc., and try different models, swap all those models, do that differently, and just see how it goes, take it from there. And then obviously we have lots of learning resources. We have a really good course on transformers, huggingface.co/course, which is constantly updated by the open source team, and it's amazing. I cannot recommend it enough. And it's not for machine learning experts, although it's a good way to learn about the libraries if you're an expert. But for developers, it's a great resource. We have a content to introduce all the task types. What does image segmentation mean? What does zero shot classification means? Huggingface.co/tasks. Amazing content by the DevRel team. So the course and the tasks page, and will get you on the right track. And then you can start experimenting with models. And I didn't say anything about training, because a lot of time you're not going to need to train. If you need sentiment analysis, if you need translation, if you need speech to text, if you need summarization, there are many, many good models that just work out of the box. So unless you have a very specific domain, maybe life sciences, or I don't know, chemical engineering, have crazy jargon that the model might not understand very well. So in that case, you can go and train, which is not a super difficult process with our libraries. But a lot of times you can work with out of the box pre-trained models. And it's just a few lines of code. Don't take
Mhm.
my word for granted. You should never trust evangelists generally. Go and try it for yourself, and ping me if you have questions.
And in terms of the inference, I'm assuming your API, if I remember correctly, it charges by like requests. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we have a service called the Inference API, which lets you deploy any model from the hub to a managed endpoint. Um, and there, you can use it in a totally free way. Obviously, there are restrictions on performance and etc. But for dev and test, it's it's the only thing you need. So you can even deploy and wire that HTTPS API into your app and test it. It's not going to be blazingly fast, but it's enough to validate the flow of the app and get some feedback on it. And then yes, if you want to have um, um, auto scale and GPU acceleration and all that good stuff, then yeah, we have paid plans, and it's pay as you go really. So yeah, inference is a really hot topic, because as we said at the beginning of the discussion, deploying models is difficult, and it takes a lot of time. So with our solutions, it's one line of code, just pointing at the name of your model on the Hugging Face hub, wait for a few seconds, and it gets loaded. So I have to say, I know you shouldn't trust me, but honestly, I haven't seen a simpler solution.
And I mean, and it sounds like, I think, and kind of going back to the simplicity versus complexity, is that one of the things that I've said to people is that, do you really even need online inference?
Yeah, sometimes it's a good point. It's a good point. Some use cases work perfectly well with batch prediction. Um, Obviously, anything that's wired into customer facing app, like we said, if I want music recommendation, I want it now. Okay, so that kind of stuff needs to be real time, and you can use the inference API for that. But if you just need, if you want to predict, if you want to, let's say, summarize documents, you have a bunch of docs that came in during the day, or you want to translate them. You had a bunch of contracts that came during the day, and you don't need real time translation. You need it maybe for tomorrow, or you want to do it once a week. Then yes, batch translation is simple. It's much more economical because you don't need to have a live endpoint 24/7. So you can just run that stuff in a Python script, schedule it any way you like, and yeah, and retrieve your predictions and put them wherever
And that
it
could be
makes
like
sense.
a way for people to like get like follow the advice we said earlier, which is you could start with Hugging Face in a batch mode,
Yeah.
and it's easier to sell it to your management because, like, for example, someone, oh, we're not paying for this, oh, whatever. And then what you could do is just do batch first and just
Yes.
use it for 3 months, and then it's
Yeah.
like, wow, this is amazing. Okay, let's just,
Yeah.
yeah, and
And yeah,
let's turn it on.
for some task types, it makes, and some use cases, batch works perfectly well, and it's you don't need anything else. It's generally, like I said, less expensive, and it's also more. It's also safer, because if your prediction job goes wrong,
Mhm.
whatever that means, okay. I mean, no one sees that, right? It mispredicts, or the model does a terrible job on this particular documents because, I don't know, the language was set wrong, or I don't know, the docs were corrupted, anything could happen. Okay, you can analyze the problem and offline and run it again. The concern with live models is, of course, what if they mispredict? What if they return, incorrect or or just bad, wrong content to to the users? And generative models, so models that don't just predict a bounded result, but for example, models that are used for chatbots, right? That actually build new
Mhm.
text, can generate offensive or
Yeah.
or just generally very weird, crappy content sometimes. So there's always that concern. So yeah, if you want to understand the model a little better and you can work with batch initially, yeah, I think it's a good way to go.
And I guess a couple other things that come to mind with Hugging Face. One is because I teach a lot of students job skills and portfolio building. Actually, recently, I've actually been encouraging students to build um, actual portfolio projects on Hugging Face. And do you have anything to say about that process?
Yes, I think I think it's if you're a student and you should use some of your time to I would say get as familiar as possible with open source, maybe even contribute, right? I mean, there are lots of things to be taken care of. So if you go to github.com/huggingface, you can see our projects there. You can start with fixing the documentation, or adding new examples, or fixing small bugs. A lot of issues have this tag that says good first issue or something.
Oh,
So yeah, and you'll always be welcome. Don't be intimidated, and if you want to contribute, and over time you can work on bigger things there, that's great. um, Another way that you could upskill is, we have this really cool product called Spaces. And Spaces is basically a simple way to showcase machine learning models as a web application. So all you have, and it's hosted on Hugging Face, right? And if you've played with DALL-E Mini or any of the other crazy image generation models in the last few weeks, you may have used Hugging Face without even noticing it. Yes, there's quite a bit of traffic there. But Spaces basically requires that you write a simple Python app using either Gradio, which is one of those web frameworks, and it's actually part of Hugging Face now, or Streamlit, and you can push that code to a managed repository on the Hugging Face hub, and it will automatically fire up the app. So if you go to huggingface.co/space, excuse me, /spaces, you will see thousands of different spaces showcasing different models. So if you have a cool idea of a machine learning powered application, why don't you build it and push it to Spaces? And the Hugging Face community will be able to use it and send you feedback on it. And it's an easy way to, it's like Heroku for machine learning apps in a sense. So it's very easy to do. And yeah, you can build your online portfolio of cool and funny or wacky machine learning applications using Hugging Face models.
yeah. I mean, I tell students, I've been saying this for years, is that if I see two resumes, one of them has links to things that work and one of them doesn't,
Yes.
I mean, who are you going to hire?
Yeah, so GitHub repo is what you would look for for a software engineer, I guess, with contributions, an active repo, right, with contributions and pull requests to projects, etc. Um, and for anyone interested in a machine learning career, I think you would want to see stuff on Hugging Face. I'm not saying it's a must, but exactly what you said. If you have junior resumes and one has that, and you can interview the person and realize, okay, there's actually hundreds of hours of work there and some familiarity and 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 understanding of what modern machine learning is, and not just someone who followed a couple of MOOCs no matter how amazing they are, it's not the same, right? It's a more, if you actually write code and push it and debug it and get feedback on it, it's just a more active way to learn. So yeah, I would encourage everybody to do that.
And similar to what you said about, I love that you have the first issues concept. Is I'm sure even some of my students have are talented enough that they're thinking, huh, well, maybe instead of me doing Kaggle and sharing Kaggle projects, maybe I could do a Hugging Face model, and I
Yeah.
could follow maybe like maybe a suggestion from Hugging Face, and I don't know, find the data myself, and like, do you have like an advanced kind of recipe for people that want to prove themselves as model creators?
Yeah, start, like I said, step one would be find some fun models on the hub, combine them in a clever way
Oh,
with a
okay.
nice looking space. Okay, no training involved, so you're not,
Yeah.
spending any money on training there. You can do all of that on your laptop. I actually do that a lot, and create those spaces. And step one, and then step two, I guess, is okay, go and grab some. We have over 6,000 data sets on the hub as well. We always talk about the models, but we do have quite a few data sets. So find an interesting data set, um, train or fine tune a model on it. Okay, push the model back to the hub so that people can benefit from that. One example is, okay, we have the Amazon reviews data set. Okay, so that's real life Amazon reviews, and there are many ways you can work with those, from classification to entity extraction to whatever. So go and train models on those data sets, build something that's unique and interesting, and then build a space with it and push it to Hugging Face. And then yes, contribute your own data sets if if you have data that you're allowed to share, or data that you scraped in a respectful fashion from whatever website that allows it, and you can contribute it to the hub, then go and do that. And it's again, it's an iterative process. Okay, start with what's available there, don't train. Okay, just combine those Lego bricks and build something fun, and then add your own bricks. Hey, here's my fine-tuned model, or here's my data set, and take it from there. And yeah, and if you're if you're a software person, then go and contribute to the libraries. There's the transformers library, the datasets library. We have hardware acceleration libraries. I mean, there's probably something for everyone there. And we try to be we try to be friendly and welcoming to new contributors. And if that's not the case, then I want to know. But I think generally this is a very friendly project. And actually, a lot of Hugging Face engineers were hired because they contributed heavily to the projects and they got noticed. So
And I think I remember you posting somewhere that like you're actively hiring. Like there is no
yes, we,
slowdown.
we are hiring. Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, we are hiring. So the bar is pretty high, as you can imagine. We do get quite a few resumes, and I wish we could answer to everybody and give feedback to everybody, why you were not selected. I know it's a challenge, so apologies if that happened to you. We're really trying to fix that. Um, but yeah, if the main thing is, if you want to consider joining Hugging Face, is hands-on experience, and more hands-on experience. Whether it's the science team, the research team, or the open source team, or the infra team, we want people. We want practitioners. We don't want preachers. Okay, so we want people who know NLP and or computer vision and or speech, and who've built actual stuff with it. And for junior folks, it's difficult, but because you're just starting, so it's not something you can easily fix. um, but again, contributing to the repos, and trying to be helpful, and blogging, and talking about Hugging Face in meetups and whatnot, is all those things will will get you noticed. and even though it might take a bit of time, but yeah, go
Wow.
and take your chance. Don't be shy. We some junior folks are actually making it. So if you're amazing, we want to hear about you.
That's great. Great, advice. I think this whole conversation, and we're going to put this onto the O'Reilly platform, and we're also going to use this as an interview in the Enterprise MLOps book, and so I'm sure a lot of people will benefit from what you said.
Yeah. Just
And
don't send me your resume, please,
okay,
please, please. Okay, I,
there's a
I'm
process.
sorry. Yes, apply. I'm the worst bottleneck ever.
Yeah.
Um, so
Well, I think your
please.
advice is great
Yeah.
advice, which
So
is
yeah,
just
that's why I was also
yeah.
thinking about explaining a little bit the whole process, because hopefully people can understand, and because I can't take 30 minutes to speak with everybody out there.
Yeah,
Although I'd love to, but it's just not. I
and I
can't.
like, what I really
So
like about what
apply on the website,
yeah.
please.
Well, and I really like what you're saying is that it's very ethical the way you're describing the way to get noticed, because look, even if for whatever reason you're amazing and Hugging Face can hire you, look what you just did. You created an amazing portfolio so someone else can hire you, right?
Yeah.
So that, to me, that's,
Yeah.
I
Sure.
think, an
Sure.
amazing
It's yeah.
strategy.
It's yes. It's I know sometimes sometimes you set your sights on a certain company, and you're kind of you're obsessed about it, and yes, Hugging Face is a good place to work for sure, and we have interesting projects and a fun team, etc., etc. But there are many good companies out there. Okay, so the best advice if you're building your career into ML is hands-on, hands-on, hands-on. Grow your skills, work on your communication skills, because it's not just the code. So start blogging, even small things. You don't have to go for moonshot projects, but if you write well, if you have interesting YouTube videos, if you speak at local conferences or meetups, it doesn't have to be like 10,000 people rooms. I've never done a 10,000 people room, so there's that. It's like it doesn't matter. It's the learning process. It's along the way, learning how to face a room, learning how to write a blog post, learning how to do videos, right? And Noah can teach you a lot about that as well. But just get to it. It's not your degree is great. Congratulations on the degree, but it's never going to be enough. So you need to have more than the degree, especially as a junior, the junior person.
Great advice. And how can people get a hold of you? Like, I know you have just blogs and YouTube channels, and like, what would you recommend if somebody wanted, they liked everything they heard?
LinkedIn, I think, is.
Okay.
I mean, I'm happy to connect with almost everybody on LinkedIn. Like if you're trying to sell me something that I really don't need, it might not work. But yes, if you're a junior engineer and you want to stay in touch with Hugging Face, and you have some, small questions that I can answer in 1 minute, yeah, go ahead. I'm not I'm not trying to be elite. I'm not that guy. Literally, people who know me would confirm. I come from the trenches. I am in the trenches. I'll stay in the trenches, and if I can help, my career is not over. I think. I hope. There's a bit of mileage left in the engine, and I know it's difficult to start in tech, to get a career in tech initially. So if I can help people with content, or small pieces of advice, I'm happy to do it. So yeah, connect on LinkedIn, and you can find me on Twitter and YouTube, etc. But yeah, there's more content that you can watch in your life, I think.
Great. Well. Thanks for the time. I mean, honestly, I learned a lot of stuff,
Well,
and I
thanks.
can
It's a
only
great
imagine.
conversation.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I think a lot of people are going to benefit from this.
Yeah, and I know thanks to COVID not, you know, ruining our lives so much these days. I'm actually on the road. So yeah, you can on my Medium blog. I have the list of events I'll be present at. I'll be in the Bay Area at the end of September. I'll be in Atlanta at the beginning of September. So yeah, I'm flying again. US and Europe. No APAC for now, but I'm working on it. So yeah, feel free to, if you're in the area, feel free to drop by. Feel free to say hi. Don't be shy, and let's have coffee and chat about machine learning. Okay.
Awesome.
I'm just a regular guy, so come and say hi, and if you want to take a picture, let's take a picture.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. My pleasure.
Okay.